All right, so the talk has actually changed title since it was announced, because I've gotten 3 rounds of feedback from different people, and I acted upon it. So now it's called Growing a Feedback Culture. And I would like to kick things off with a question to you all. Can I give you some feedback? Yeah? I dread it. I could see Lola like holding her breath. Yeah, I guess we've all heard that question, and it creates a response in our body, like, oh, maybe hard to breathe, maybe our pulse is quickened, maybe we get sweaty palms, or like tunnel vision, or our hearing is sort of like interrupted. And those are all really good things, in a way. Or, if you're a little bit like me, your mind is racing, has already launched a full-on Sherlock Holmes investigation into forensic evidence about all the possible things that you might have done wrong. And maybe it's even concluding that you are not enough, and your belonging in the group, or even your life, is at stake. How many of you recognize this? Yeah? Yeah, some hands are up. That's good. So this is good because you have a well-functioning physiological response that is trying to protect you against harm. It's basically your brain is communicating with your body, and it's sending cortisol and adrenaline to flush your body to prepare you for fight, flight, or freeze response. So we heard from Dr. McLeod earlier today about the freeze response and the shame that kind of comes with that. And sometimes that's the response that we need in order to survive. So it's a perfectly normal response. The reason why all these things happen is often because we're still seeing feedback as a threat. So it might be a threat to our own self-understanding. It might be a threat to our identity. It might be a threat to our status or position. So, in some situations, there's quite a lot at stake for us. And the trouble is, if it's a real threat situation, this is great. But if you're receiving feedback, that is not good, because you're very likely not to be in any kind of receptive mode when your body is, in these 3 modes. So I'll pause here and talk you through the presentation agenda. I want to share a story around feedback that comes with a lot of learning, but it also comes with a lot of pain, and I'll be sharing both parts. I want to talk a little bit about culture change and feedback and how they kind of tie into each other. I want to talk a little bit about employee engagement and how that relates to feedback and why it's important. And then I will share 10 principles for growing a feedback culture. And they are kind of high level. They're not principles for having feedback conversations like practical stuff. It's more looking at the system and how to, affect the culture as a system and the feedback change or feedback culture in relation to that. And I'll get you to the first step to get you started. I'm sure you're already somewhere on the way, from what I've been observing and hearing today. It seems like feedback is kind of like a natural part, but there's a little action that I will call. So, my story of feedback, or a little bit about my background. So teams have always been my happy place. I have an almost 20-year journey in design and innovation behind me. I came from visual communications design into interaction design, UX design, service design, strategic design, close to business, and then design leadership. I'm also a coach and a mental health first responder, apropos the UX of mental health. And basically, my career spanned working in a few different places. I started my career in the Sony Design Center in London. And that was the in-house part, and then I went agency side. I worked in a brand and design agency called Kontrapunkt here in Copenhagen. I worked as a design director at ustwo, the digital product studio in our Malmö studio, and then in a place called Vertical Strategy, which was an innovation consultancy, also here in Copenhagen, that got bought by Bain Company a couple of years ago. And at that point, I kind of decided that I wanted to start my own thing. And I took the leap, and Thought Wardrobe was born in the middle of pandemic, actually following a coaching session of 15 minutes, but maybe that's a story for another time. So right now I'm focused on employee experience, team building, and leadership development through design, strategy, and coaching. And teams are my happy place, so I'm in my happy place right now, even though I'm like nervous being on stage. So the story that I want to share with you is quite a vulnerable experience. It relates to my days as a manager. And basically what happened is there was a person, disclaimer first, I don't want to sugarcoat because it's hard. So there was a person on my team that was perceived as not performing or delivering, living up to the expectations. So that perception was kind of like a snowball that kind of escalated over time and strengthened itself over time. Very few people were actually so like specific and explicit about what was actually wrong. And the trust for this person was undermined. And as a manager, I was like, okay, how do I handle this? Because it was so elusive. So I decided to have a sit down with the person and give them reputational feedback from all these people who didn't take it directly. And by the time we had the conversation, this feedback was like way outdated. It was like several years, maybe old, which means that that had been going on for a long time. It was really hard to explain. It was hard to exemplify. It was hard to contextualize. And I did my best, I really did, and I prepared for the conversation. And I failed miserably. And it was basically a very intangible delivery because there was no tangible feedback, because it was no specific and timely feedback, and it wasn't direct. So the person did not understand the feedback that was given and ended up leaving the team. And the reason was that they felt that their teammates didn't have their back, so she couldn't count on people. So that was one particular situation that was really, really jarring for me, and I've seen it actually several times since. Both as a manager in like different places, but also in client companies, in my coaching, like with my coaching clients, that this happens. And I'm actually quite sure that there's people in the room who have these colleagues or someone on their team that is not maybe, you know, super sharp and no one's really saying anything, or they have maybe a behavioral kind of trait that people don't appreciate. And maybe there's some eyes rolling and, you know, kind of weird looks, but not anyone's really saying anything out loud. It's a lose-lose-lose situation. And the person loses because they're not actually given the opportunity to do something about it. And I can imagine that the person that I'm talking about, you know, has a lot of answers that are unanswered and is not really fair to them. The givers don't get the opportunity to practice honesty and have good conversations and build a relationship, because these situations can have a potentially completely different outcome. And then the managers that are kind of stuck in the middle kind of end up like bearing the load in a way and sitting with the consequence, because we are ultimately accountable. And with that comes a lot of like feeling of responsibility, weight, guilt, shame, that is also hard to get rid of. So ultimately, lack of feedback or unspecific or poorly given feedback is undermining the well-being in our teams and destroying trust in our organizations. The reason why this is important to me is because I have two values that are really at play here. One is authenticity, and honesty being a part of that authenticity. And the second one is discovery. It's like looking into what is possible here. How could this have potentially a great outcome if we have this honest conversation? Because we kind of go with the assumption that, oh, this is going to be bad and this can't possibly end well. But what if it can? So that's one of the reasons why feedback is so important to me. And the second one you saw in the very start of the talk before I sorted out my screens, it's because I think that there are too many, too long boardrooms in our organizations. And if I loop back to the talk, I think it was it Can or McLeod that said, I think it was McLeod that talked about this like continuum. And this is the extreme spectrum of the continuum. I'm thinking that there must have been a lot of tolerating behaviors and steps, actions, attitudes in order for it to get this far. And when that is the case, we are complicit because we're enabling it. We're enabling it as individuals, and we're enabling it as a system. So that's why I think it's super important to actually take a brave step into having these difficult conversations so that we can have each other's backs in it, so that we can build honest and authentic relationships, and so that we can have our own backs in it, because we've actually done something. And I'm sure that everyone here has a kind of sense of integrity about what is right and what is wrong and what is needed, even though we might not always, live up to. And it's also a way to keep the egos in check and not let them completely out of control. So, culture change and feedback being a part of culture change. I feel the need to kind of like define culture a little bit, just for the sake of this presentation and so that we have a shared understanding of it, that culture, in my understanding, is created through behaviors, actions, habits, and rituals. And it is aligned with some values. It might be aligned with strategy and all of that, but it's actually happening in our words, in our tone of voice, in our body language. That's where culture is created, really, and how we convene and how we come together and how we communicate with each other. So all of these things then constitute a lived experience in a workplace, let's say. Maybe it's of an employee, maybe it's of the end customer. And any company will have a lived experience. And the best ones will be deliberate about designing that lived experience. So feedback culture in this kind of framing is, in my view, a systemic approach to feedback that is aligned upon and nurtured by the entire organization. So it's not just about design reviews. It's not just about your performance reviews. It's also about customer feedback. It's about leadership feedback. It's about how our processes are working. It's about how we collaborate across departments, how we collaborate within our teams, and ultimately, like, how we are delivering the thing that we're supposed to deliver, the impact that we're looking to have in the world. And implementing a feedback culture takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of commitment, and it's a long journey. So it takes some patience as well. And feedback, to kind of like come a little bit further down in this wide and then a narrower understanding. So feedback, I really love this quote by Thomas Tranströmer, who received the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2011. Two truths approach each other. One comes from inside, the other from the outside, and where they meet, we have a chance to catch sight of ourselves. And I really love that because it's a definition that creates this intersection of truths. And in that intersection, there are new understandings, new meanings, and new possibilities and ideas that can emerge. And when we work with any kind of change, and these are some factors that are particular for the feedback culture change, but I guess they apply in many different other contexts, there might be fear of difficult conversations. There might be fear of retribution, especially when there's a position of power at play. There might be lack of tools, lack of language, maybe leadership is not supportive, maybe there's a lack of commitment, or it's not a strategic priority. Or it's just like general resistance to change, like we want to be comfortable and change is not comfortable, so we kind of resist a little bit. So hopefully the principles that I will share with you kind of address these barriers, or at least some of them. And I speak a lot, so I included some pause slides, so can all have a bit of a breather to just land. So I want to talk to you a little bit about employee engagement and how feedback plugs into that. And Gallup defines it as involvement and enthusiasm of employees in their work and their workplace. It's pretty simple. And what they derived from a bunch of data, so they have these engagement surveys and a lot of research from companies all over the world, so they actually have a lot of valuable data and are thought leaders in this. And they define these 5 factors. The first one is purpose. Why are we here together? What are we here to do? The second one is development. People want to grow, they want to develop, they want to expand on their skill sets, on their knowledge, on their, who they are. A caring manager, so someone who actually gives a damn about you, should be hygiene factor. In fact, unfortunately, it's not. We're not there yet. Focus on strengths. So instead of fixing people and all the things they are not, we build on what they are and make that better and bigger and leverage it in the right way. And ongoing conversations. Because those build relationships, basically. So we know that healthy organizations perform better in many ways. So an engaging workforce will actually directly reflect in the market performance and hence financial performance as well. And this is something that should be of interest to any leadership team. Happy employees are happy customers. There's a direct link between the two. And every leadership team will want to hear about finance. They want to show me the numbers. And that is something that Helle and I were having a conversation prior to the conference, and Helle said, but how do we actually bring leadership on board? Because there's resistance in leadership and it's hard to get them involved. This is how you get them involved. So that's kind of how I want to segue into the 10 principles that I want to share. And the principles are kind of they're derived and synthesized from many different places. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here because a lot of the methodology for feedback has come from Chaos Pilots, Hyper Island, ustwo has institutionalized it within our organization. I'm bringing principles from the organizational relationship systems coaching, that is coaching education I'm currently also like almost done with. And it also comes from like the things that worked really well in a lot of different kinds of feedback processes that I've been a part of designing, and also the ones that didn't go so well, like the story before, and serve as a learning. So the best way to engage leadership is to create a business case. So the first one is called create a business case. Explain the numbers. And I want to share with you the Gallup calculation again. They had calculated that one actively disengaged employee, so someone who's like completely checked out from their workplace, costs 37% of their annual salary in productivity loss. So I took an example of 100,000 euros because it's kind of a realistic salary for, let's say, a senior. And because, yeah, it's easy to calculate. So disengaged one person costs 37,000 euros in productivity loss. In an average team of 15, the disengagement rate pre-pandemic was 13%. That is 2 people out of a team of 15. That's 74K euros. That's the cost of 2 people being completely checked out. Then there's also the middle engaged that are not actively disengaged, but they're not bought in either. So that also has a cost. And what it leaves us with is actually only a third of the workforce that is actively engaged. So the calculation, I think, is pretty clear that any kind of initiative, training, process design that you may have is, you know, it's the size of a fair project in an agency world, right? I think that the numbers are pretty clear and that the investment will always pay off. So that brings me to the second principle, which is anchor it a strategy. A strategy will always create, like if considering for the sake of the thought experiment that the purpose is clear, that the why we're here is clear, and then how we're gonna get to where we wanna be is like the strategy. So it's like alignment around vision, mission, goals, company goals, discipline goals, individual goals. Like a lot of companies work with the OKR framework. So something like that, like stacking it up. And the strongest cultures actually make feedback a top strategic priority because it directly contributes to organizational health and team well-being. And yesterday, unfortunately, I wasn't here because I was holding a full-day workshop for a client here in Copenhagen, doing just that. And one of their core values is honesty. So we were looking at what does honesty look like when it comes to feedback, and how can feedback culture support the value, or like they call it virtues, the virtue of honesty. So feedback in this case became like a strategy for implementing a process around it. So there's also a measurement part. So whenever you have goals, you want to define success. You might want to measure that success. And it's defining like, what are you going to measure? Are you going to measure the number of feedback conversations? Are you going to measure team engagement? Are you going to measure changed behaviors? Are you going to measure customer satisfaction? There is a company here in Copenhagen actually called Netigate, and they're making a direct link and software to manage that between employee engagement and customer engagement or customer satisfaction. So happy employees equals happy customers. So they have software to actually measure those things, which I find quite fascinating. So looking forward to exploring that a little bit more. And if there's any one of you that has more specific numbers about feedback as a business case, like feedback specifically, not so much the engagement part, I would be super happy to receive any links or, yeah. Principle number 4, anchor it in leadership. So if you want your feedback culture to scale and be implemented properly and successfully and grow, you will have to have leaders behind it. And here I mean leadership both people in formal roles and positions, but also people with influence who might not have the mandate, but they have a lot of influence. So find the ambassadors between your colleagues and your leadership team to help you, drive this change and can support you. And here I'm actually curious about how many of you have given your leader feedback in the last year? Okay, pretty good. Last 6 months? Yeah. Last month? Yeah, pretty good. Still fewer. Last week? Not that frequent. Okay. So sometimes we assume that leaders have all the answers, and that's not the case. We don't. We also need to grow, and the only way to grow as a leader is to get feedback and, improve the way that we interact with our teams, with our organizations. And the way that I like to think about that is it can almost never be often enough. So I like to see it as a busy highway with frequent traffic going in both directions. Yes. Okay. Adapt the learning mindset. So our mindset is basically a collection of beliefs, assumptions, notions about ourselves, about the world. It's colored by our previous experience. It's colored by the context, the cultures that we're coming from. It can be adapted from other people, our environment, the cultures. And it basically constitutes predominant beliefs, norms, and behaviors. And mindset is important because both our verbal and non-verbal cues are going to reflect it. So in systems coaching, we call that a double signal when those two things are not aligned. So someone's saying, "Oh, I'm fine," and then they're in this defensive position. So these are kind of things that people will read even if you don't say anything. So that's why it's important that the mindset and what you're actually doing are coherent. So what I would like to introduce you is the term growth mindset, which was researched by American psychologist called Carol Dweck. And she basically found out in her groups that there's two kinds of groups when it comes to mindset. And one of them is the fixed mindset. That's based on a belief that our talents and abilities are given and not expandable. And feedback in this context is often seen as a threat. We are rewarding having answers. We're rewarding having answers and achieving results. And failure is seen as a lack of ability and to be avoided at all costs. So what this often leads to is a culture of performance, perfectionism, fear of failure, and more often than not, also competition. The way to think about mindset that is more helpful is to think about it as a growth mindset. In growth mindset, there's a belief that the talents and abilities that we have are something that can be improved through effort and learning and perseverance. That feedback is seen as a gift, and we reward asking questions and making an effort instead of having all the answers. And failure is a part of the process, is seen as a way to learn. And it leads to culture of experimentation, learning, growth, and collaboration. So feedback is ultimately about creating learning organizations, including having tolerance for failure. And the next principle is called create trust and psychological safety. Now, trust is interpersonal. It's between two people, and it rests on two things. I can trust your competence and ability to deliver, so I can count on you to deliver the work that we're doing. And then I trust that you have good intentions. So that's where interpersonal trust comes from. And the other parameter is psychological safety of the group or a team as a whole. And I like Brené Brown's definition of psychological safety, which is that it's an environment of rewarded vulnerability. So you are not afraid to share your innermost thoughts, the things that might be difficult. You're willing to be wrong, you're willing to make mistakes, you're willing to display your weaknesses, and you're willing to trust that that won't be used against you in the group. Now, there is 4 different stages of psychological safety as defined by Dr. Tim Clark. And it's important because a lot of us work in innovation. And the first one is inclusion safety. So I am included in this group, and I'm happy to be there. I can be a part of it. The second one is learner safety. This is an environment that is safe for me to learn. The third one is that I am contributor safety, so I can contribute to this group with the knowledge, experience, and ideas that I have. And the last one is challenger safety. I feel safe to challenge the preconceived notions, the strategy meeting, the leadership team at the strategy meeting presenting something. And the interesting thing about this is that there's an innovation threshold. The challenger safety is the innovation threshold. So unless you have psychological safety and it's progressive, you won't be able to innovate if you're not there at the very top, which is why it's difficult to implement innovations in many sort of contexts. And then trust and psychological safety go together with feedback. You need feedback to create it, and then you create it by having feedback. So it's kind of a catch-22, and the way to disrupt that loop is to ask, can you give me some feedback? It's kind of a nice question. Can you give me some feedback? Like asking about the presentation, making it better. And this can actually be your biggest advantage. Principle number 6 is about providing team training and structure, because there are a lot of great feedback tools out there. They come with clear process steps, language, and it will create a shared foundation, a shared language, a shared understanding. So when you have that, you don't have to spend time framing, and as a receiver or like whoever is on the other side of the feedback conversation doesn't have to spend mental bandwidth trying to get their head around what this is actually about. So there's more room for the conversations and the type of conversations that really matter. And people will be more present, and it enables everyone. And it's also like create enough support to enable. It's kind of like handrails, but not prevent from, doing things and freestyling and changing and controlling. So start small and iterate is the next one. It's very much the build, measure, learn mindset that a lot of us know from the work that we've been doing maybe in digital for many years. You will need continuity, you will need consistency, smaller chunks of feedback more often. And if you start small, a small effort is low risk, is usually low cost. Your leadership might go on board with it, but you'll need to follow through. And the way that you can also think about these smaller initiatives is like testing the immune system of a system or the organization of the team. Because every living system, including our teams, have an automatic immune response. So when you implement change, the more drastic it is, apropos disruption earlier today, the more drastic it is, the more likely for the system is to go into this defense mode. So if you take the immunization approach and you kind of like feed the system with small little doses of change, you will also encounter the barriers and you will more easily be able to work through them. Principle number 8 is take the good with the bad. When needed, just share that difficult feedback. say what you mean, be straightforward, be compassionate. You can do both. You can be compassionate and be honest and be real. And I know there was a conversation earlier today about the feedback burger or so-called feedback sandwich. And I don't want to make anyone wrong. So if it's working for you in different contexts, just by all means, it's up to you. I have really bad experience with it when it comes to constructive feedback and trying to change a behavior from someone, because it sends mixed messages. And it's when I asked for feedback on those conversations using that tool, people go like, yeah, but I don't know which one is it? Was it good or was it bad? It was kind of like a mixed bag. So what would you like me to do? What are you expecting here? So it can lead to a lot of confusion, so be mindful of using it. And also, don't just use it to make yourself feel good about delivering the difficult message. So what's the purpose of the conversation and who are you in service of? And the second part is that people want to be seen, heard, and respected at work. And the best way to make them feel seen is to appreciate them for all the things that they do really well, so that they can become more of that. And that behavior and those attitudes can scale and grow throughout your culture. So, you can have a winning pitch wall, or we had a business team with a bell. Whenever there was a project sale happening, would ring a bell and have Slack shout outs or Monday morning meeting shout outs or whatever. Just acknowledge the people in your team. And it takes so little to start. Just to say, I see you, you matter. And I'd like to invite you to do that right now. So think about a person, anyone. Could be someone from your team, could be a leader, could be someone that's done something that you really were inspired by or really appreciated. Think about that person right now. You got 10 seconds. That's all it takes. Okay? I would like you to use this form. You can take out a Post-it or a phone or whatever and write what you appreciate about them. Be short and sweet. Don't fluff around. I'll give you a minute. I know we're a little bit over time, Helle. I hope you can bear with me for a few more principles. We're almost there. And I'll take some water. Yeah? Now, I would like you to set yourself a deadline for when you will send that feedback to the person. Yeah? That's how we coach through accountability. How would you like to be accountable for this? You can pick a buddy, maybe you can put it in the Slack channel and see if we can be, you can be accountable to each other. Yeah, send it. Costs you literally nothing than a minute of your time. The last, it's all together now. Because as much as leadership needs to role model, fostering a feedback culture is a job of everyone in the organization. It's everyone's responsibility to have respectful conversations, have the appropriate tone of voice in everything that you do. It's the coffee conversations, it's the hallway conversations, Slack conversations, wherever, company meetings, all hands meetings, team meetings, retros, everything. If you gossip, you create a culture of gossip. If you complain, you create a culture of complaint. If you blame and point fingers, but don't actually give feedback, then that's the culture you create. You can also be respectful, and you will have a respectful culture. You can be honest, we'll have a culture of honesty. It doesn't really matter, but the way we behave is the culture that we create. And when we want to create cultures of safety, belonging, creativity, inclusion, thriving, well-being, possibility, potential, I know that I do want to create those cultures. And I try to, damn hard, every day. And I really hope that you will join me in this mission. And that brings me to the last one. You need to choose to change. It's not always easy, but it's important. And this is not just a principle, it's really life philosophy, actually adopted from the Stoic philosophy. I can see people smiling. It's like, yeah, I recognize that. You are always a choice. It doesn't matter what happens to you. It doesn't matter what kind of feedback you're getting, what the client is saying, you are a choice. You can also choose not to change. You can also choose to say, actually, that feedback's not relevant for me, or it's not relevant right now, or I can't focus and I won't focus on this right now. You can counteroffer. Or you can go, I'm all in, I'll do it. And then follow up and tell, how are you changing? And hopefully people will observe that change in your behavior. And that makes you a role model. So choose to change. And there's no better way to change the culture than being the change that we want to see in the world. I have a little bit of a newsletter sign-up freebie for you. It's a mini guide to feedback conversations. It contains 10 principles for good feedback conversations, so that's a little bit more hands-on. And it's got 3 steps before, while, and after for preparing to give feedback and for preparing to receive feedback. So hopefully that kind of contextualizes and operationalizes some of the principles, and you can actually take, and use it in your everyday work. And you can actually do that right now. And I hope that, Jane Rufino is not too critical about the forms of my sign-up. Hopefully everything works as it's supposed to. It's thoughtwardrobe.com, and in the bottom of the page there's a newsletter sign-up. If you sign up by tomorrow, the gift is included. It's like a 7-page PDF. And other than that, you can find me here and let me know how it's going. And let me know how this resonated, and let me know if you need help in your organizations, because I like to live my purpose every day, and it makes me passionate about the work that I do. And I appreciate you all to be here, to listen, to hopefully spread some of these ideas and take them further, and for sticking it out for so long. It's quite late. Thank you.